climate change. There is evidence for climate change and evidence for humans causing much of it. Don't believe this video? Do your own research before you try to deny it. The reality and its causes. Earth is warming at an unprecedented rate, and how we know this. We have had thermometers and other instruments recording temperatures around the world since the mid-19th century. Tree rings, ice cores, and ocean sediments allow estimations of temperatures much further back in time, as well as having trapped air bubbles that show the atmospheric composition. The increase in greenhouse gases is well documented and directly linked to human activities like burning fossil fuels, which trap heat. Computer models based on fundamental physics and chemistry can accurately reproduce the observed warming trend and predict future warming. Human activities as the dominant cause. Greenhouse gas emissions. Concentrations are higher than any time in the last 800,000 years. Ice cores. Carbon dioxide concentrations have increased by over 40% since pre-industrial times. Human activities release about 35 billion tons a year. Methane, 2.5 times the pre-industrial level. Nitrous oxide, 20% higher than the pre-industrial level. Reflectivity of the sun's energy. Agriculture, road construction, and deforestation leads to net effect of local warming, heat islands. Evidence. Global temperature is rising. Oceans are getting warmer. Ice sheets are shrinking. Glaciers are retreating. Snow cover is decreasing. Sea level is rising. Arctic sea ice is declining. Extreme events are increasing in frequency. Ocean acidification is increasing. The following charts are found at nasa.gov, climate.org, the EPA website, and everywhere science and evidence is so readily available for us. Catch your breath. There is a lot going on, but in this video, we will simplify the answers. However, let us choose creative collaboration and listen well to each other. Let us consider ramifications of potential solutions as we find these solutions together. I did my own research on the government websites themselves, and I'm not freaking out anymore from thinking that Trump rolled every single one of the EPA regulations, and now we're headed for a real climate disaster. So calm down. Don't let the media put you in a panic. First of all, let's take a look at what regulations were altered by the Trump administration, with Lee Zeldin as the administrator. The EPA, through data, chemistry, and research, had found 6 greenhouse gases that constitute a threat to public health and welfare, and so thus came the Clean Air Act of 2009. This act determined that the emissions from motor vehicles contribute to climate change. In 2016, it determined that airplanes also contribute, and there was a phase down of methane emissions and allowance allocations for HFCs. The methane phase down was scheduled to be down by 85% by the year of 2036. What changed with the Clean Air Act by the Trump administration? Notice the fact sheet I got from the EPA website. Notice the words reconsideration and time provided. We'll go through specific regulations in this video and summarize the changes. Remember though, that just because regulations are less restrictive, it doesn't mean that people and entities won't do the right thing. That's why it is important for us to be educated about what is going on in the climate and what is our responsibility. Let's look at the core responsibilities of the EPA. They are still doing all of this, but there have been some other changes. Let's go through those changes in summary. The Clean Power Plan is replaced by the Affordable Clean Energy Rule, which gives states more flexibility. The vehicle emissions standards have had relaxed requirements for the automakers. The methane emissions regulations had restrictions on leaks and venting reduced. The mercury and air toxic standards have been revised also to relax standards. The Clean Water Act changes have narrowed the definition of waters of the United States that reduces the scope of waters that were protected by the federal government. The National Environment Policy Act now limits the environmental review of infrastructure projects. These changes move regulation from the federal level to the state level. Although companies have relaxed regulations, it doesn't mean that they don't have their own goals. True, some companies might not care, but if enough people and entities believe in the reality of human-caused climate change and how we can alleviate it, we'll see those companies grow and prosper. We vote with our actions and our investments. The ACE rule provides a list of technologies that states could use to improve the efficiency of coal-fired power plants. No, it's not the answer, but it is a less drastic economic change. States have the authority to determine which technologies to require and how to implement them. There is reduced federal oversight. The net result is that states have more control to match their specific energy mix and economic conditions. The good news is that politics is closer to the people. We need to work more with our local politicians. As far as the vehicle emission standards, the rate which automakers were required to improve gas mileage has been reduced. Does this mean that they will delay their research and development? Perhaps. Perhaps not. So much relies on people doing the right thing. They act based on what they believe. That's why it is so important to be educated on what is happening regarding climate. California's authority to set its own stricter emissions has been revoked. I don't understand this because of all the move from federal to state regulation. However, educated people will do the right thing. MATS now allows power plants to emit larger amounts of pollutants like mercury from coal-fired plants. What to do? Let's find out how much they are emitting and send letters. I know there is a reporting agency called the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reporting Program where you can even file a violation. There is given more time to coal-fired power plants to comply with the standards or less stringent requirements, so as to not cause economic disruption. The Clean Water Act implemented the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, which reduces federal oversight of wetlands and smaller streams. The federal jurisdiction is limited to traditional navigable waters, certain tributaries, and specific adjacent wetlands. This shifts more regulatory responsibility to states. NEPA has time limits to complete environmental impact statements and assessments. Page limits for the documents are set. Alternatives that agencies had to consider are narrowed in environmental reviews. The definition of effects were revised to include limitations on the consideration of cumulative impacts. The types of projects subject to NEPA review is limited to reduce federal oversight. These are all done in the intent of efficiency and to move regulation away from the federal government. Who else is involved other than the United States federal government? There is the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There have climate scientists uniting to nominate U.S. experts for the annual IPCC report as found in the Science News magazine EOS. There are also nonprofits such as the Environmental Defense Fund, the Climate Action Network, and many others. In the private sector, there are renewable energy companies, electric vehicle manufacturers, and many others. Also, other companies are making commitments to sustainability and net zero emissions. We've got organizations in the United States, an international organization, and several nonprofits. Listed as well are businesses that are committed to alleviating climate change issues. In future videos, we'll address the other government agencies, international organizations, nonprofits, and businesses. My takeaway is that it is important to listen, talk, and stay away from hysteria. Let's stay away from hateful, anger-inciting memes on social media, and instead of barking at each other, let's do some work together. Let's educate and not berate. Let's go into conversations and research with open and inquisitive minds. It is only through creativity and collaboration that we will all reach highly important solutions together. In future videos, we'll talk about the solutions happening and compare them with costs and benefits and considerations for unintended consequences. Subscribe and get notified. Stay tuned. This is an exciting time in the history of humanity.